The tale begins with the MC, Sakagami Sojiro, a 16-year-old high school student, feeling exhausted as he walks up a steep and long hill. As he ponders the unfortunate location of his school, he quietly grumbles about climbing this hill, especially when he oversleeps. At this pace, he's pretty convinced he'll be fashionably late. Rumor has it the school's founder had a peculiar love for high places, leading to its inconvenient location. Sojiro, however, thinks the founder was an idiot for it. As he limps forward, a girl suddenly speeds past him on a bicycle, leaving him in shock. He finds it incredible that someone could use a bike on such a steep hill with such ease. The girl stops ahead and turns to look at him. She identifies him as a second-year student and with a casual yet urgent tone, tells him to get on the bike since they are both going to be late. Sojiro hesitates for a moment but ultimately agrees, climbing onto the back of the bike. As they begin moving, he apologizes for hitching a ride and promises to repay her in some way. The girl, however, brushes off his concern, claiming it's no big deal and adding with a hint of pride that she's as strong as an ox. Her confidence confuses him, but he doesn't question it. His attention drifts instead to her skirt, which seems to have been altered to be shorter than standard. He vaguely recalls that such modifications are common among third-year students. Curious about how she knows he's a second year, he prepares to ask, but she cuts him off, dismissing the matter entirely. Sojiro checks his phone and realizes that they are already late. When they finally reach, he buys her a can of soda from a vending machine as a token of his gratitude for the ride. She accepts the soda with a small smile, but apologizes once again, expressing regret that they couldn't make it on time. Sojiro reassures her, saying it's not a big deal. Even if they only make it to the second period, he reasons, it will still be fine. He observes her carefully, intrigued by her demeanor and wondering if she might be a third year or perhaps a new transfer student. The girl suddenly shifts her posture, brushing her bangs back in a relaxed yet deliberate manner. She asks him shyly if he has any friends, a question that catches him off guard. He eventually replies that he does have a few. The girl doesn't react much to his answer, instead mentioning offhandedly that she is good at divination. This unexpected statement leaves Sojiro feeling puzzled. The more she talks, the more enigmatic she becomes. With a chuckle, she shares how her fortune-telling skills have an uncanny knack for scaring people off. Her friends never seem to stick around after she reads their fortunes. To Sojiro, it seems like a hex in disguise. She goes on to describe a specific incident where someone asked her for a love divination. Their compatibility had been so poor that she suggested strange options. Unsurprisingly, the person never returned. Hearing this, Sojiro feels a mixture of shock and disbelief. He wonders aloud what made her think such comments wouldn't scare people off. She then shifts her gaze back to him and casually offers to foresee something for him. She asks if anything is troubling him, but when he doesn't reply, she teasingly accuses him of hinting for her to leave. Sojiro smiles and in an attempt at humor admits that he would like to have a girlfriend who is older than him. However, the expression she gives him in response is so bewildering and almost horrifying that he cannot decipher it. He wonders how she could make such an unsettling face. Hoping to lighten the mood, he tries engaging in some light banter, but his words seem to miss the mark completely. Frustrated, he asks her directly if it's wrong to be interested in someone older. In response, she rolls her bangs back again and asks him to show her his hand. When he complies, he begins to think that perhaps she doesn't actually dislike him. However, his thoughts are abruptly derailed as his attention is drawn to her unbuttoned shirt. She examines his palm and smiles, declaring that, as she expected, he is destined to be with someone younger than him. She adds that it won't be long before he gets a girlfriend, specifically a kohai. Her words leave Sojiro confused. The idea of being with someone younger doesn't resonate with him. Before he can respond, she announces that it will happen as predicted and bids him farewell, reminding him that he is welcome to visit the Divination Club anytime if he needs guidance. As she departs, Sojiro watches her go, finding her both unusual and intriguing. He muses over her strange personality and wonders why he never thought to ask for her name. On the other side, the girl, Mizuki-senpai, arrives at her classroom. When the teacher grills her for showing up late on day one, she quickly deflects the blame onto her poor flat-tired bike. Classic excuse. Her thoughts, however, remain fixated on Sojiro and his wish for an older girlfriend. As she takes her seat, she reflects on her earlier divination. She is certain of what she saw, but for now, she resolves to keep her actual year level a secret from him. Despite her best efforts to dismiss the encounter as insignificant, she finds herself blushing at his reactions. Though she tries to convince herself it doesn't bother her, her lingering frustration suggests otherwise. Later, Sojiro searches for the Divination Club to meet his newfound senpai. Stopping before its board, he doubts its legitimacy. The messy display hardly looks official. Gathering his thoughts, he finally steps inside where Mizuki is munching on a piece of bread. She turns around to look at him, her expression neutral yet curious. He asks her if he can eat there, and she gulps down her bread before asking him with a sharp tone who the hell he is. Shocked, Sojiro stares at her, asking if she has forgotten who he is. After a moment of silence, she playfully admits she was only joking. Across the room, Sojiro is overwhelmed with emotion, nearly brought to tears. He pulls out a chair and sits down, asking her if she always eats lunch here alone. Mizuki shrugs and replies that she doesn't have any friends, so that's just how it is. As Sojiro settles his chair in front of her, she narrows her eyes, questioning why he's sitting there. He nonchalantly declares that all he wants is to grab a bite with his beloved senpai. Nothing more, nothing less. Mizuki playfully quips, asking if he's a smooth operator, before slyly remarking how adorable she is. Sojiro raises an eyebrow and jokes that boasting about her own looks is a tad strange. Mizuki swiftly stands up, grabs his chin, and stares him down, demanding an explanation. She challenges him to repeat his comment face-to-face if he dares. Feeling the heat, Sojiro throws up his hands in surrender and concedes that there's absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, he openly admits that she's undeniably cute. This flusters Mizuki, but she quickly regains composure, pulling out a crystal ball. With a determined look, she declares it's time for her special divination. Sojiro watches, thinking that perhaps she's shy about being complimented. However, his attention shifts as she holds the ball in an awkward grip. He silently predicts disaster, and sure enough, the ball slips from her hands and shatters on the ground. Darkness washes over her face as she stares at the broken pieces in shock. However, instead of crying, she points at Sojiro and claims that it's his fate. She turns away, muttering that she might as well go home. Before leaving, Mizuki spins back around, grips his neck, and exclaims how pathetic it is that he cannot change his own fate, proclaiming her divination as absolute. Sojiro yells, asking if she intends to make his head share the same fate as the crystal ball. He then stammers out that he can feel her body pressed against him, making the situation even more chaotic. Mizuki freezes in shock as she realizes what he's saying. Suddenly, she hugs him, remarking with a dreamy expression that dying in a cute girl's arms must be every man's dream. Sojiro mentally disagrees. Flustered, he shouts that they should focus on cleaning up the mess instead. Mizuki releases him and agrees to clean up, reasoning that the advisor will get angry if the mess is left unattended. Sojiro watches in disbelief as she picks up shards of glass with her bare hands. He mutters under his breath that she must eat gorillas for breakfast to be so strong. Mizuki, seemingly unfazed, kneels down to continue cleaning. While attempting to grab a particularly sharp shard, she complains that the clubroom lacks proper cleaning equipment. Sojiro grabs her hand and pulls it away from the glass, firmly telling her not to do something so reckless. He leans down and declares that in such situations, it's the Kuhai's job to handle the dangerous work. He asks her to promise she won't do anything like this again. Mizuki blushes, taken aback by the sincerity in his voice. After a moment of hesitation, she agrees, though she turns away to hide her embarrassment. She comments that it's good he's taking responsibility now and thanks him for cleaning. Sojiro ends up slicing himself while cleaning up the broken pieces. Mizuki, being the caring friend that she is, insists on inspecting the injury. She grabs his hand and makes his thumb dance on a piece of paper. Sojiro stares at her in horror as she declares that she's using his blood to create a seal for the club. Panicking, he yells at her, asking if she's lost her mind. Mizuki sighs, remarking that this is the kind of club she runs, but Sojiro responds that despite everything, he doesn't hate it. Mizuki smirks and agrees with him. Sojiro winces in agony, mentally labeling the girl as an enigma he can't crack. Yet Mizuki, unfazed, demands to see his injured hand once more. Before he can protest, she unexpectedly licks the wound and claims it will magically stop bleeding. With a nonchalant wave, she strides towards the exit, declaring she will submit his club application. Sojiro, dumbfounded, watches her exit, pondering if he's fallen into a peculiar rabbit hole. He ponders what sort of mischief he's gotten himself tangled in. Meanwhile, Mizuki blushes as she walks down the hallway, feeling giddy about securing his thumbprint. However, the sealed club application is ultimately denied. The next day, while getting ready for school, Sojiro hears a reporter say it's a perfect day to go out. The reporter further mentions that it's time for Namazu-senpai's fortune corner, which reminds him that he still hasn't gotten his senpai's name. Suddenly, someone calls out to him from behind, and he turns around, muttering that at least they should let him see the fortune for Sagittarius. The guy gets an earful from the girl for his clothes scattered everywhere and is reminded to use the laundry basket. He sheepishly agrees, asking if she could tone down her morning vocal exercises. The girl fires back, stating she'll hush up when he starts adulting properly. Sojiro defends himself, declaring he's the poster child for decency and manners. Meanwhile, the news continues in the background as Sojiro heads to school. In the clubroom, he plops down at the table and prompts Senpai to share more about herself, proposing she begins with her name. Mizuki, clutching a box containing a mysterious object, inquires what's on his mind this time and what information he's seeking. Jokingly, she wonders if he's interested in her shoe size or something else. Sojiro retorts that if she's keen on sharing, he'd prefer to know about something else. As she stands up, she's about to slip, prompting Sojiro to glance at her shoes and note aloud that the color of her slippers matches those used by first-year students. Mizuki freezes in shock, clearly panicked. When Sojiro asks if she's okay, she abruptly points at the door and exclaims that she didn't realize they had a door at the entrance. Confused, he asks what she's even talking about. Mizuki, grasping for an excuse, insists that she knew these were first-year slippers. Sojiro's jaw drops in shock as he stares at her, struggling to process the revelation that she's a freshman. Mizuki sighs and admits she's a high school repeater. Startled, Sojiro jumps from his seat, quickly apologizing for his unintentional rudeness, still unable to comprehend that she repeated an entire year. Mizuki manages a smile, but it quickly fades when he quips, "Ah, no wonder you're lacking in the friends department." On the verge of tears, Mizuki snaps that repeating a year has nothing to do with her lack of friends and finds his assumption insulting. Sojiro panics, realizing he's made a mistake. Desperate to change the topic, he reminds her that she still hasn't told him her name. Mizuki brushes it off, claiming her name is Senpai. Sojiro remarks that she sure likes saying nonsensical things sometimes. She counters by joking that she has nothing to tell about herself, not her name, nor her race. Sojiro stares at her stunned, and asks what she means by race, questioning if she's even human. Mizuki smirks, stating that her name is Senpai and her race is unknown. Frustrated, Sojiro wonders aloud if she's fine with such a bizarre claim. Mizuki waves the club application papers in his face, urging him to join the club and get it over with. Sojiro reluctantly takes the papers, admitting he understands, but he suddenly leaves them aside and grabs her hand. Mizuki's eyes widen in shock, and she quickly pulls her hand away, asking if he brought an umbrella today. Sojiro replies that he didn't because the news predicted sunny weather all day. Mizuki rolls her hair between her fingers and instructs him to stop by the shoe rack after school, saying she has something for him. Sojiro gazes out the window, wondering what Mizuki is planning when she suddenly smacks his head, snapping at him to stop mumbling and follow her. Startled, he asks what she meant by something. Smirking, Mizuki reveals it's an umbrella, with her included. Sojiro stares in disbelief, convinced she's an idiot. She opens the umbrella, inviting him to join her, even offering to go wherever he wants. Embarrassed, he steps under it, trying to suppress his thoughts. He wonders why she didn't bike to school, to which Mizuki blushes and mumbles about Senpai taking the bus on rainy days. She even remarks that he sounds like a snake when he calls her Senpai. Sojiro can't resist calling her Senpai, much to her annoyance. At the bus station, Mizuki questions if Senpai is also taking the bus. He confirms, but only part of the way home. Mizuki then demands her umbrella back, and he obliges. As she mentions seeing him at school tomorrow and starts to leave, a puzzled Sojiro shouts after her, asking if she forgot her bus stop. Mizuki smiles and tells him not to catch a cold, walking off without further explanation. Fuming, Sojiro feels as though he's lost as a man. He wonders if Mizuki thinks she's some kind of princess. Just moments ago, he'd even considered sending her off himself, but now he's angry with himself for the thought. Meanwhile, Mizuki reflects on her earlier lie about repeating a year in high school. She marvels at the fact that Sojiro believes such a ridiculous story. She can't figure out why she's going to such lengths to maintain the lie. Frustrated, she recalls Sojiro's preference for older girls and feels she had no other choice. Mizuki sighs in anger, blushing as she remembers eating lunch with him in the clubroom and walking home together under the umbrella. The memory gives her chills. Folding her umbrella, she watches the sunrise and decides to remain as his senpai for now. Ubayashi Taka confidently approaches Sojiro, declaring he'll divine his personality. He presents a set of pictures, asking which type of girl Sojiro prefers. After a brief hesitation, Sojiro selects option C. With a slight grin, Ubayashi dramatically reveals that Sojiro likes girls with big melons. Flustered, Sojiro stammers, unsure how to respond. At that moment, Mizuki happens to pass by. She gently tugs at his shirt, catching his attention. He turns to her and asks if she is on her way to a different classroom, but Mizuki remains silent, her gaze fixed on him. Ubayashi, curious, inquires if she's his friend. He explains that Mizuki is their senior, a third-year student. He introduces them, and Ubayashi, ever courteous, offers his hand in greeting. However, Mizuki shyly hides behind Sojiro, prompting him to glance back at her in confusion. Ubayashi asks if she is suspicious of him. Bemused, Sojiro lightly remarks that she is like a small animal. Attempting to ease her discomfort, Ubayashi offers her candy, insisting it's not suspicious at all. Mizuki finally speaks, her voice soft but firm, rejecting the candy. Both boys are stunned by her unexpected response. Seizing the opportunity, Ubayashi proposes a deal. If she becomes his friend, he will tell her a secret about Sojiro. He immediately protests, but she hesitates, peeking out curiously from behind him. Ubayashi playfully leans in and reveals that Sojiro prefers big breasts, something he recently confessed. Mizuki squints at him and straightforwardly asks if it's true. Caught off guard, he stutters out a timid yes. To his surprise, Mizuki proudly declares that hers are ample too and waits for his reaction. When pressed for more info, he sheepishly admits his affection for them. Instead of getting upset, Mizuki grins and labels him a stand-up guy. Not to be left out, Ubayashi boasts about himself. He tries to bribe Mizuki with candy once more, but she politely declines. Suddenly, Sojiro remembers that Senpai is a fortune teller and turns to Ubayashi. With a nod, Mizuki confirms that her readings are usually spot on. Intrigued, Ubayashi can't contain his excitement. Sojiro's forehead creases as a light bulb moment strikes him. Wait a minute, aren't her predictions usually tied to specific actions? Are they even influenced by what you do? He recalls that Mizuki often gives readings through physical touch, but he's never seen her do a classic palm reading. Mizuki quietly prompts Ubayashi to show his hand. He obediently extends his hand towards her. After a thorough examination, she abruptly declares, "You're going to kick the bucket soon." Both boys freeze. Ubayashi stares at Sojiro, exclaiming if he's really going to perish. Unfazed, Mizuki suggests carving out his lifeline with a chisel. She then turns to Sojiro, casually noting that he dropped his notebook. Flustered, he tries to refocus on her fortune-telling, but Mizuki leans in with an unreadable expression, cutting him off. Panicking, he blurts out that he was just thinking about her chest, then quickly tries to backpedal, saying he meant that she often leaves her buttons undone. Mizuki glances down, then back at him. Realizing he has only made things worse, Sojiro's face pales. She leans in even closer, her voice dropping to a sultry whisper. She teases that she'll only do it in the clubroom. Completely stunned, Sojiro jumps back, his voice cracking slightly as he demands to know what she means by it. The school bell suddenly rings. Mizuki begins to walk away, calling out for him not to forget to stop by the clubroom in his free time. She gives him a playful nickname as she departs. Sojiro watches her leave, utterly bewildered, before turning back to his friend. He suggests they should go now. Ubayashi, still mulling over the divination, calls Sojiro by a strange nickname. Annoyed, Sojiro mutters for him to stop because he's thinking. With a sigh, he reminds Ubayashi not to forget they need to submit their essays. Both boys exchange a look of dawning realization. Ubayashi exclaims that he completely forgot, panicking as he asks what's going to happen. Sojiro shakes his head and sighs again, saying that his grades are going to die. Ubayashi gasps. Mizuki's divination was spot on. Trying to calm him down, Sojiro admits that he was also surprised at first. In the clubroom, Mizuki carefully reads Sojiro's palm, explaining the significance of various lines. Sojiro, unimpressed, dismisses the activity as pointless and admits that he has been thinking about it for some time now. He comments that her divinations often seem inconsistent and abruptly asks if he can try reading her palm instead. Mizuki shrugs and tells him to go ahead. Sojiro takes her hand, studies it intently, and informs her that she has many sixth sense lines. Mizuki raises an eyebrow, impressed, and remarks that he seems to know quite a lot about fortune-telling. Sojiro casually admits that he just looked it up online. Smirking, he adds that it likely won't be long before he surpasses her as a fortune-teller. Hearing this, Mizuki quickly withdraws her hand, a mischievous glint in her eyes, and suggests they play a betting game instead. The scene shifts to Sojiro's sister, Sakagami Rin, who returns home and notices a pile of bread on the counter. She asks their mother about it, and her mother explains that Sojiro bought it. Rin then asks where he is, to which her mother replies that he is currently taking a bath. She adds that Sojiro told them they could take as much bread as they wanted. A while later, he emerges and looks around, asking where the bread is. Rin, confused by his agitation, inquires why he is making such a fuss, pointing out that it's too early for lunch or dinner. He frantically asks if she knows what happened to the bread he bought. Rin, looking nervous, lies that she has no idea. She then asks why he's so obsessed with bread, and Sojiro shoots her a sharp look, asking why she's suddenly being so courteous. Panic sets in as he realizes the implications of Mizuki's divination and their bet. Rin looks at him in confusion, and then it dawns on her it's part of a divination game. The narrative shifts to an earlier moment when Mizuki explains the terms of the game. The weather is irrelevant, and the winner will be the one who can correctly predict what will occur tomorrow. Sojiro inquires about the loser's consequence, and Mizuki cleverly proposes that the loser must obey the winner's every command. Sojiro is surprised and questions if she means absolutely anything. Mizuki boldly confirms, allowing him to even choose the wager. The two settle on predicting Sojiro's next day's lunch, with him mentioning that he typically cooks it himself. How deliciously daring. Mizuki hadn't expected him to choose something so mundane. Poking his forehead playfully, she agrees and smugly declares that she's already won. She reveals that tomorrow's lunch will be rice. Sojiro panics. Rice is precisely what he had planned, even though he had bought a large amount of bread. Back in the present, Rin tries to reassure him, pointing out that they still have rice. Sojiro, clearly shaken, questions her seriousness and begins to well up. In an attempt to calm him, Rin offers to scrub his back when he gets home later. Suspicious, he shoots her a glare and demands to know if she devoured all the bread. Rin vigorously shakes her head, claiming she has no idea what he's talking about. He accuses her of fibbing, pointing out that she doesn't usually talk like that. Rin, trying to cover her tracks, declares that it doesn't matter because she cherishes her brother. Sojiro mutters that it's not surprising at all. She sulks, insisting she didn't swipe the bread and would never tell a lie about it. Letting out a sigh, he affectionately pats her head and tells her not to fret. She quickly rebukes him, calling him a weirdo and demanding he cease. Sojiro informs her that because she took the bread, all they'll have for lunch tomorrow is rice. At school the next day, Sojiro begrudgingly congratulates Mizuki, admitting her victory. Mizuki grins smugly and says she already knew, adding that now he can't go around claiming he'll surpass her as a fortune teller. Sojiro, rolling his eyes, asks if that's what she was worried about. Mizuki then reminds him that it's time for his punishment. Sojiro quickly interjects, reminding her that she can't ask for anything lewd. She laughs and reassures him, stating that all she wants is for him to officially join her club. She adds that she won't take no for an answer. Sojiro, unfazed, accepts the form from her. Curious, she asks what he would have made her do had she lost. He hesitates for a moment before admitting that he was hoping she'd tell him her real name. He sighs, lamenting that his sister's interference prevented him from winning and getting closer to the truth. Mizuki, touched by his honesty, offers to tell him her name anyway. Sojiro's eyes widen as tears well up that she won't even properly tell him her name. She rolls her eyes, calling him annoying. She then grabs his face, pulls him closer, and tells him that her name is Mizuki Asuka, and she will be in his care from now on. Sojiro, stunned, asks if she just called him by his name and addresses her as Mizuki-senpai. She corrects him, insisting he calls her Asuka-senpai instead. Sojiro stubbornly continues calling her Mizuki-senpai. The back and forth continues until Mizuki, frustrated, punches him in the face. Groaning in pain, he hides his face and mutters that he's not done yet. Gathering his courage, unleashes his secret move, softly calling her Asuka. She freezes in surprise, her cheeks blushing. She stammers, asking if it's not too early for that. Sojiro dramatically collapses to the floor, leaving her in shock. Acting quickly, she rushes to his side and inquires about his well-being. But Sojiro, still lying on the ground, dismisses her concern with a nonchalant wave, insisting that he's perfectly fine. Afterward, the old teacher eyes Sojiro and asks if he's looking for a divination club advisor, noting how rare that is given the club's peculiar nature. Leaning in, he whispers that Tsukimi-sensei is the one to ask. Just as he says her name, Tsukimi turns, her expression inquisitive, and asks Sojiro what he wants her to teach him. Identifying herself as the advisor, she strides over with a smirk, sarcastically wondering if she's about to hear another sermon or if someone has an issue with her messy hair again. The teacher bluntly admits he does have a problem with her hair, clothes, and work ethic. Basically everything, but brushes it off, saying Sojiro is here for her. Watching Tsukimi, Sojiro thinks she's strange. Catching his stare, she looks at him questioningly. He hands her the club registration form, stating his reason for being there. Tsukimi briefly examines the form and leads him outside, casually asking what this is about again. Sojiro, confused, realizes she hasn't fully grasped the situation. Then it clicks for her, he's here to register. With a playful wink, she jokes that he didn't come all this way to propose, though she wouldn't blame him. Confident in her looks, Sojiro, flustered, notes how she oddly reminds him of senpai. Tsukimi, teasingly, asks if he joined because of Asuka's body. He scrambles to deny it, but she laughs, spinning around before calling him Asagoni. When he corrects her, she turns back, slightly flustered, but still insists on the question. Stunned, he wonders what's wrong with this school. Tsukimi-sensei smirks, claiming no high schooler joins such a peculiar club without ulterior motives. Sojiro hesitates before explaining that, while the club surprised him at first, the mystery intrigued him. Even if Senpai were a guy, he'd still join. It just seems fun. Tsukimi taps her fingers thoughtfully, admitting she hadn't planned on recruiting. Just then, someone murmurs Sojiro's name, distracting him. Seizing the moment, Tsukimi snatches the form, opens the door, and declares his registration approved. With a small smile, she assures him that despite appearances, Asuka does have a weakness. She promises to support him, but warns him not to open the cabinet in the clubroom. Sojiro stares, doubtful that Senpai, normally brimming with confidence, has a real weakness. Just then, he spots her frantically trying to catch a butterfly. When she notices him, she panics, calling for help as the butterfly gets too close. To his shock, she's wielding a wooden sword against it. The butterfly lands on the blade, making her jump straight into Sojiro's arms. Flustered, he tries to point out how awkward this is. At that moment, Sojiro realizes his reason for joining has shifted. Mizuki trembles, repeatedly insisting the butterfly will kill her. Meanwhile, Sojiro, overwhelmed, admits to himself that he doesn't hate this situation, but isn't this bad? Determined to act, he carefully catches the butterfly and tosses it outside. Smirking, he asks if he looked cool. Mizuki bluntly replies that he was, until he ruined it with that line. Still confused, Sojiro asks if she's really scared of insects. Mizuki shakes her head, saying she even talks to them on her days off. Suddenly, Tsukimi appears behind them, sarcastically commenting that it sounds fun. Her tone shifts as she places a hand on Mizuki's head, demanding to know if she messed with the cabinet. Mizuki frantically denies it, but Tsukimi narrows her eyes, pointing at the wooden sword. Sojiro watches Mizuki, noting her nervousness. Tsukimi turns to him, asking if he also disobeyed her. He immediately denies it. With a sigh, Tsukimi instructs Mizuki to return the furniture. Mizuki agrees, grabbing boxes to reorganize. As she approaches a table, she spots another butterfly. Eyes wide in horror, she freaks out again. Tsukimi shouts at Sojiro to stop her. Alarmed, he rushes forward, grabbing Mizuki before she can cause chaos. Watching them, Tsukimi laughs, asking if his talk with the butterfly didn't go well. Mizuki, her face red, angrily demands to be let go. Tsukimi smirks, asking if they were bitten. She's seen it happen before. Sojiro, stunned, demands to know what she means by bitten by a butterfly. Tsukimi explains that someone was affected the last time the cabinet was opened, glancing at Mizuki knowingly. Sojiro, confused, suddenly notices a strange blister forming on his hand. Panicking, he shows it to them. Tsukimi, unfazed, tells him to sleep it off. Sojiro shouts in disbelief, but Mizuki pats his shoulder, thanking him for helping. Still freaking out, he yells that he doesn't want to die. After this, our poor lad develops a newfound fear of insects, a condition that worsens as he spends the next 2 days bedridden from the mysterious blister. Before leaving for school, Sojiro is listening to the news about the bad luck of Sagittarius. He sighs, mentioning that it sucks. Suddenly, Rin comes out of her room, yawning. He closes the door, informing her that he will be leaving now. As soon as he steps outside, his feet slip, and he bangs into a tree, with all the lemon tea spilling on his head. Later, when he arrives at school, Mizuki notices his disheveled appearance and asks him if he's having a bad day. He replies that everyone has one of those days and sighs, admitting that he looks disgusting right now. Mizuki grabs his tie, asks him what's wrong with his clothes, and tries to fix it. Sojiro casually mentions his bad luck today, but when Mizuki doesn't seem impressed, he quickly backtracks and apologizes for being a Debbie Downer. As Mizuki struts off, Sojiro realizes his tie is mysteriously missing, only to spot it adorning Mizuki's neck. She nonchalantly explains that helping people is their club's top priority, all while fixing his hair and casually roasting him about his genetics. In the end, Sojiro is left in shock, comparing his hair to a pile of fertilizer. He shouts again, wondering what on earth she was doing to his hair. Mizuki smirks, mentioning that a little makeover doesn't hurt at times like this. He reluctantly agrees, thinking she might be right when suddenly something hits him directly on the head. He yells in pain, and the boys from a nearby window apologize, asking if anyone is hurt. Sojiro tells them he's fine, but the boys start jumping and laughing, teasing him about his weird hairstyle. Sojiro clenches the ball in anger, lamenting his misfortune. Mizuki looks at him and comments that it seems the makeover wasn't enough. She smirks, and Sojiro asks what else is left. A moment later, excited noises come from the room, and Sojiro emerges looking like a punk straight out of the host club. Mizuki bursts into laughter at his new appearance. On the other side, Sojiro thinks this girl is toying with him. Between laughs, Mizuki tells him that earlier she saw a kitten and when she approached it, a lot of interesting things happened. She laughs uncontrollably while Sojiro, despite his embarrassment, feels glad she's having fun. After laughing for a while, Mizuki calms down and returns to normal. Sojiro asks if he can give her a makeover as well, and she agrees. Once she sits down, he starts styling her hair. After a bit, she removes her jacket and asks him what he's doing. He replies that he's just taking a photo of his work. He looks at her in confusion, but suddenly, she pulls him toward her. Sojiro stares at her in shock, and she mentions that they should take a comparative photo together. He agrees, and as he takes out his phone to click the picture, she taps his hand, suddenly feeling awkward. Concerned, he asks if she's okay, and she assures him she is. After taking the photo, Sojiro looks at it, thinking that he will use it as his phone wallpaper. He smirks at how natural and relaxed they look in the photo. Mizuki then tells him she's locking up, and he offers to close the windows for her. As he closes the window, he tells her he thinks his misfortune is cured. Mizuki looks at him and asks if that means she's the one who makes him happy. Sojiro freezes, wondering if this is a proposal or something like that. Suddenly, Mizuki asks if he's proposing to her, which causes him to lose control and slip on a ball. Mizuki catches him, and his head lands against her chest. Sojiro, in a panic, realizes he was a bit naive to think his bad luck had come to an end. Mizuki smirks and playfully inquires if she brings him joy. Locking eyes with her, he admits that she does indeed. Deep down, he knows he could have avoided this predicament if he had really tried. Meanwhile, Mizuki is confident in her abilities, convinced that this was bound to happen according to her powers of prediction. Blushing, she can't help but wonder why her heart is pounding so fast as she gazes at him. Sojiro quirkily asks when she plans to release him, his voice trembling. The next day, Mizuki consults Sojiro about her new swimsuit, expecting a fashion critique. However, all he can seem to focus on is her figure. With a puzzled expression, she mentions that it's a hand-me-down and feels a bit loose. In a moment of sheer awkwardness, Sojiro blurts out, "Are they fake?" She shoots him a sharp look, wondering what exactly he's insinuating. Flustered, Sojiro quickly clarifies that he was referring to the swimsuit's age and fit, not her assets. With a playful smirk, Mizuki confirms that her chest is indeed authentic and warns him that a wardrobe malfunction might just lead to some awkward situation. Sojiro, completely flustered, blurts out that he would introduce himself first before realizing what he just said. The moment the words leave his mouth, he stiffens in regret. Snapping out of his daze, he quickly changes the subject, looking around and awkwardly asking if this is the shop Mizuki mentioned. She confirms it and tells him to think of this as an out-of-school activity for the divination club. As Sojiro sits down, waiting, she begins trying on swimsuits. After a while, she steps out in a swimsuit, confidently asking for his opinion. Keeping a straight face, he simply says it looks bold. Mizuki pauses, then demands clarification. When he repeats himself, she huffs in frustration and turns back inside to change. She tries on several more swimsuits, asking for his opinion each time, but he keeps using the same word, bold. Annoyance builds as she clenches her fists. Sensing her frustration, Sojiro quickly apologizes, admitting he was just messing with her. Internally, he thinks about how great all the swimsuits look on her, and how cute she seems in each one. Expecting her to lash out, he braces himself, but instead Mizuki simply adjusts his collar. She then declares that she will buy all of them. Watching her, Sojiro notices how genuinely happy she seems whenever he calls her cute. When she returns, he asks why she didn't buy the school swimsuit as planned. Mizuki looks at him in confusion, and he jokes that her memory must have a capacity of 5 megabytes if she's already forgotten. Embarrassed, she admits that she never planned on going to the beach before because she had no one to go with. As they stroll off, Mizuki pulls a surprise U-turn, beaming as she declares that she's got him this year, making their summer a tad more thrilling. Sojiro returns the smile, predicting a jam-packed summer ahead for her. Mizuki cheekily inquires if he'd be up for extending their shopping spree, to which he happily consents, claiming it would be a pleasure. They visit different shops, buy clothes and accessories, and even take a photo together with their bubble tea. At the end of the day, Mizuki thanks him for accompanying her. Caught up in the moment, he exclaims that it felt like an after-school date, only to be swiftly brought back to reality by Mizuki, who teasingly reminds him that they were just at a school club activity. With a sigh, he quips that they looked more like a couple who had been dating for 3 months. She nonchalantly replies that there's nothing wrong with that. She then asks if he's free afterwards since they still have some time. Sojiro informs her that she has already taken him out on a date, then looks at his phone and notes that he's responsible for cooking dinner, which means he needs to go home shortly. Out of the blue, Mizuki expresses that her hands ache from lugging all the bags. She stops briefly before a thought brightens her expression. Inquisitive, Sojiro inquires about the issue. With enthusiasm, she reveals that her home has cockroaches and inquires if he can assist her in dealing with them. Sojiro pauses, inquiring if she truly wants him to come over. He teases her about potentially using a cockroach to predict the future, prompting a glare from her as she insists on knowing if he is mocking her. Flustered, he stutters that he believes going over isn't a good idea, mumbling that it seems off in many ways. Mizuki, puzzled, inquires what precisely is so concerning about it. Panicking, he maintains that everything is fine and assures himself he simply needs to accept it. As Mizuki exhales deeply and hesitantly consents, he looks at her, attempting to dispel his anxious thoughts. Gently tapping his face to regain his focus, he reminds himself that he is a competent individual. Mizuki, watching him, remarks that sometimes he really scares her. She then asks her mother when their dinner will arrive, prompting a scolding for referring to her brother that way. Her mother reassures her that she trusts Sojiro to act appropriately, since he's also a student. At Mizuki's apartment, Sojiro notices the room looks untouched and finds it odd that she invited him over and went to take a shower. While putting away groceries, he discovers the fridge is completely empty, making him question whether she truly lives alone. He remembers Mizuki claiming she lives independently and cooks lavish meals for herself. She then left to take a bath. When she emerges from the shower, they bicker over her action before she finally goes to change. Annoyed, she reminds him he's seen her in a swimsuit before, while he mutters that she overreacts to everything before stepping out. From inside, Mizuki hears the clatter of pots in the kitchen and calls out to ask what he's doing. He casually replies that he's started making dinner. Though hesitant at first, he says his body moved on instinct. Mizuki shrugs, saying she doesn't mind, and comments that he can be surprisingly assertive. Looking puzzled, Sojiro meets her gaze as she pats him on the back and teases him for showing off. Irritated, he inwardly mutters that she's a pain and asks where she keeps the plates. Mizuki retrieves them, explaining she bought them specifically for him. Sojiro looks at her, baffled by the fact that she's 2 years older than him. Shaking the thought away, he tells her to start her homework. Mizuki grins and sarcastically asks if he's her mother again. Ignoring her, Sojiro continues cooking, but Mizuki lingers, watching him intently. Her constant interference frustrates him, and he finally tells her she's like a child. He pats her head and asks if she wants to help. She gazes, questioning his patronizing attitude, and warns him to stop or she'll kill him. Unfazed, he instructs her to cut the tofu. Mizuki retrieves a knife as Sojiro eyes her warily. Watching her slice, he quickly stops her, reminding her to curl her fingers to avoid injury. Taking her hand gently, he demonstrates the proper technique. Their eyes meet briefly before Mizuki, annoyed, remarks that he really is the assertive type. Sojiro apologizes, explaining he just wants her to be safe. With a sly grin, Mizuki retorts that right now he's more dangerous than the knife in her hand. Suddenly, a beeping sound interrupts them. Sojiro returns to the rice cooker, announcing that the rice is ready. He marvels at how quickly modern models work. Mizuki smiles faintly but says nothing. Once the food is ready, Sojiro serves it and urges her to eat. They thank the meal and Mizuki takes a bite. Her face lights up as she praises the dish, calling it delicious. Sojiro casually mentions that he usually handles the cooking at home and insists it's no big deal. However, Mizuki adamantly praises his skills, making him smile in relief. He's genuinely glad she enjoys it. He then compliments the precision of her tofu slices, to which Mizuki proudly claims that they're perfect because she's awesome. Sojiro chuckles, but as he glances outside, he notices it's already quite late. Realizing he may have overstayed his welcome, he mentions that he should probably leave. Mizuki offers her spare futon if he wants to stay, but he politely declines, saying he needs to get home. She looks at him confused, inquiring if she said something wrong. Sojiro reassures her she didn't and clarifies that he would still leave even if she minded. Mizuki then points out that she doesn't have any umbrellas for him to use. He brushes it off, knowing it's not even raining. However, as soon as he opens the door, a heavy downpour begins. He stands there stunned. Mizuki chuckles, a playful smirk forming on her lips, and informs him with mock seriousness that there's no way he's leaving now. Sojiro turns to her, visibly uneasy as the door shuts firmly behind him. As the heavy rain continues, he asks Senpai for an umbrella, but she refuses, saying no umbrella could withstand the storm. He considers calling his father, only to learn he won't be home tonight. Determined, Sojiro declares he'll leave anyway, but Mizuki softly calls his name, stopping him. She confesses it's been a long time since she's shared a meal with someone and asks him to stay a little longer. Hesitant, Sojiro agrees, and they sit watching TV, though his thoughts drift. He wonders if Mizuki likes him, but quickly dismisses it, blaming her lack of boundaries. Trying to establish distance, he brings up the importance of propriety, warning her that a girl who casually jumps on a guy can be seen poorly. Mizuki, unbothered, admires herself in the reflection of the darkened screen, claiming a cute girl always stares back at her. Frustrated, Sojiro groans, questioning if she even understands the implications of inviting a guy over. Instead of answering, Mizuki leans against him, making him question her feelings again. Just as his instincts urge him to embrace her, she comments on the show, pointing out how a similar moment led to awkwardness. Startled, Sojiro pulls back, relieved he didn't act on impulse. Suddenly, lightning strikes, cutting the power. Mizuki clings to him, her voice trembling as she admits she's scared. Bewildered, he sarcastically thanks her for the clarification, but she refuses to let go. Frustrated, Sojiro reminds her that she saw this coming, yet Mizuki insists that knowing doesn't make experiencing it any easier. As he presses her about her foresight, she unexpectedly pulls him down with her, both collapsing to the floor. Mizuki laughs softly, teasing that they always end up like this. Sojiro, exasperated, asks how far she can see into the future. Mizuki cryptically claims she knows everything but rarely looks too far ahead, only knowing up until the blackout. Growing serious, Sojiro questions why she goes to such lengths for him. But before he can finish, Mizuki gently runs her fingers through his hair, saying she does whatever she wants. Nothing more, nothing less. Sojiro hesitates before asking what she'd do if he were having inappropriate thoughts about her. Mizuki's cheeks flush as she nervously asks what he means. His heart pounds as he realizes there's no denying his feelings. Mizuki leans in, curious, and asks what he plans to do next. Sojiro stares at her, lost in thought, unable to find an answer.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial about my love. Here I stand,